Welcome back to the Byline Breakdown, where we delve into the stories behind the headlines. I'm your host, Mike Moliterno. We are joined by George Nelson, Deputy Managing Editor of the Business Journal and author of a story that I'm pretty excited about, which is about a new Hollywood props museum that is in the works and coming to Trumbull County. George, great to have you on the show again.
Thanks for having me on.
And I know this topic is probably of some interest to you. You're a bit of a sci-fi fan, correct? And a lot of this museum is going to be focused on sci-fi, I think.
Yes. I'm looking forward to going to the museum once it's actually up and running. But Fortunately, we did get a chance to check out the warehouse where a lot of the props that were donated are being stored.
So we're going to get to that in a minute. But first, let's just, for people who may not know, what are we talking about? What is this museum and what's it, what are they thinking it's going to look like?
Well, the museum is the core of the collection for this new museum is about 10 or 11 truckloads of props that have appeared in various Hollywood movies, television shows, donated by John Zabrucki of Modern Props company. Zabrucki grew up in Warren,
right?
So that's the local connection. He wanted to give a lot of what he'd created over the years a home that the Trumbull County Historical Society could use to develop a museum around.
So he founded this company. You said Modern Props.
Modern Props.
Right. And so basically what did they do?
They manufactured props that were used in all kinds of television productions, television and film productions, primarily science fiction, shows like The Incredible Hulk from the 1970s or the Star Trek movies from the 80s, RoboCop, The Last Starfighter, any number of TV shows and films over the decades.
How do you get that job? I want to do that. How do you just say, I'm going to be the guy that tinkers around and then they put it in a movie? That seems pretty, I'd like to do that. Well, okay, so that's who it is. So this museum is going to house a lot of those artifacts.
Yes.
Right? So could you be specific? What are some of the items that perhaps people will recognize or have seen in movies?
Some of the most instantly recognizable ones probably would include the egg chairs from Men in Black, from that, the scene where Will Smith is taking the test. Mm-hmm. There is a device that's called the most important device in the universe. It's a set of glowing red tubes mounted on brackets. It has literally been in hundreds of productions from Star Trek movies and Star Trek TV series. Just over the years, if it's been a science fiction product of the last of a good 30-year period, it's probably been in it.
See, that was interesting because I'm not at all familiar with that item. Everyone talks about that one, and I don't think I've ever seen it or seen. Maybe I'm wrong, but
Google most important device in the universe. There are videos that will show you like an assortment of TV shows and movies that it's been in.
Okay. And I could be wrong, but I think you mentioned Men in Black. I think the memory erasers, didn't he design those?
I don't know if they had those, but they do have some of the hand weapons from Men in Black. Mind you, they're still cataloging this collection. So it's basically a full-time job just going through these 10 or 11 trucks that are, I think there might be still one that's on its way that hasn't arrived in Warren yet that has more of the props.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. So you went and you saw the warehouse where they're housing this stuff. Where
obviously, this is a secret location because obvious reasons.
Right. Well, yeah, we're not going to say that, but I guess just take us inside. What did you see? What are they doing? How's the museum handling all of this stuff?
Basically, just at this point, it's the big job is cataloging, finding out what the items are, and we're talking about different kinds of hand weapons, things that are retrofitted from actual guns, spy briefcases, exotic laboratory equipment, just a whole array of things.
How's the progress coming? Do they think this is going to take them a year to finish cataloging this stuff, or
several months at least, I think.
Okay, sure.
And obviously the Historical Society does other things, so they can't, devote all of their resources every day to it.
Well, right. That's kind of something I was going to ask you about, because the Historical Society, as far as I know, wasn't planning to do this. John Zabrucki just kind of said, hey, I'd like to donate all of this stuff. And so now, on top of whatever they were doing, in their day-to-day jobs before, now all of a sudden, let's develop a museum and let's start going through all of the truckloads of items. And I also imagine they probably aren't, science fiction isn't their bread and butter. It's Trumbull County history.
It is a challenge, to be sure, and they've had to bring on additional people to deal with this project. On the other hand, how often do you have an opportunity to develop a museum and you're literally given most of the exhibits? They're still trying to acquire items. Obviously there are things that Zabrucki didn't work on. He didn't work on fantasy films a whole lot, and they determined that was a focus that they wanted to have as well. So they're acquiring different items along those lines, as well as science fiction projects that he wasn't involved with. But yeah, obviously it's a tremendous opportunity when you're putting together a museum. One of the big challenges is finding what you're going to put in it.
Right.
A lot of that problem's solved.
So I guess the problems that they are going to have, or some of the challenges they're going to have, is finding a location for the museum and funding it.
Well, one of the challenges is already taken care of. The city of Warren earlier this year allocated American Rescue Plan funds to give to the Historical Society to purchase a building near downtown Warren.
Right.
That is going to at least serve as the first phase of the museum. They're already envisioning having to expand on that. And of course, you're right, it is going to be an expensive proposition. One of the I recently did a story on the Appalachian Regional Grant Program that the local partners recently submitted an application for, and they are seeking about $4 million to renovate that building to get it into shape to be a museum space, and they are going to have to expand on it. So this is going to be there's going to be a lot of money that's going to have to be raised, obviously, to make this thing a reality.
And I think they're going to know whether or not they receive that grant in February.
February, yes.
Yeah.
And of course, there's they're going to be embarking on a fundraising campaign probably in early January, February as well. I know discussions are already underway, trying to attract some donors to the project. But one thing you mentioned, the fact that the Historical Society is focused on history. There's actually a decent amount of science fiction history in Trumbull County.
Really?
Well, no.
No, please. I'm interested. Yeah.
You had a couple of science fiction writers, fairly well-known ones, Edmund Hamilton and Lee Brackett.
I forgot about Lee Brackett. Okay, right, I knew that one. Yeah.
Who worked on the screenplay for Empire Strikes Back. So she's sometimes called the mother of Yoda, because the character was introduced in that film.
Some of these items, especially some of the Star Trek items, and they come with a pretty large built-in fan base.
Right.
So I would imagine the potential for tourism to attract people to this museum is pretty large. I guess, have you heard from anybody how they're planning to market this thing, or what they think what impact this museum is going to have on Warren and Trumbull County?
One of the things that they're looking at as a model is the National Comedy Museum in Jamestown, New York. It's a similar sized community, similar income levels and such, that's been operating for I think a couple of decades, but it's it regularly draws people. Just to share a personal experience, I was on vacation last couple of months ago and went to a place in Ticonderoga, New York, where someone had gotten a hold of the the construction plans for the sets for the original Star Trek series, and he's been rebuilding them in this building as a tourist attraction, and people regularly go to it.
Very cool. Well, before we continue, we're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with some more talk about some of the specifics of the exhibits and their potential impact.
Attention all business enthusiasts in Northeast Ohio and Western Pennsylvania. The Business Journal has been your trusted partner since 1984, giving insights, updates, and fostering growth in your region. From Mahoning to Mercer, from Columbiana to Lawrence, we've got you covered. For just $10 a month or $99 a year, unlock our digital troves, or get both print and digital for only $99 a year. Make the smart business choice. Subscribe now.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the specifics of the collection. I guess you're a big fan. Maybe could you talk a little bit about how the pieces reflect the evolution of science fiction in cinema?
Well, one of the things that they're looking at is they want to use this to kind of illustrate how people in the past envisioned what the future would look like.
Right.
And to kind of through interactive exhibits, kind of see how people today are going to envision what's coming down the road.
And I think a part of this museum is going to be educational too, correct?
Yes.
So what's that aspect going to look like?
One of the parties that they're talking about working with is, the Roger and Gloria Jones Children's Center for Science and Technology. I've spoken with Marvin Logan. He's definitely interested in partnering with them because obviously science fiction has served to inspire scientists over the decades. I mean, you can listen to stories all the time about people who say they went into science or medicine because they watched Star Trek in the 60s and 70s.
And what were some of the Star Trek items that are in there?
Well, the one that jumps out to they do have one of the, a communicator, for example, that William Shatner's James T. Kirk used in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
Okay. Very cool. So what are some of the upcoming steps for the museum?
Well, when I last talked to Megan Reed a few weeks ago, for the story, they were still in the process of getting initial renderings. I mean, that's going to be a key before they can really go out and aggressively ask people for money. They have to be able to show them, this is what we're envisioning.
Have you heard any response from the community to the project? Any excitement or anything like that?
I think people are generally enthused about it. I mean, this is obviously, right now, science fiction is more a part of the culture, the popular culture, than it was obviously when I was growing up. It was more of a niche thing, but now with the explosion in science fiction and superhero films, even, it's more part of the daily conversation than it was.
Oh yeah, sci-fi and fantasy are way bigger than they ever used to be. You used to watch like movies in the 80s. And there was, if you would have talked about Lord of the Rings being this big thing, everyone would have laughed at you. Nobody would ever want to make that movie,
20 years ago, if you said Iron Man to someone, what would they think of first?
Well, I would have known about Iron Man because I read comic books, but I would have also said, don't make an Iron Man movie, make an X-Men movie or something like that. I wouldn't have said, Iron Man will be the movie that will kick off this giant franchise that is just going to dominate movies for the next 15 years. I wouldn't have said that.
Well, that's what happens when you're in bankrupt or when you're making trying to make other movie deals and you license your key assets off to other companies, you're kind of left trying to work with what you haven't sold off. But that's another conversation entirely.
Hey, it worked. You know what I mean? It worked for them. So let's just wrap up. When are they hoping to open? I know they have some tentative plans.
I think optimistically they're looking at 2026 maybe.
Okay.
But that depends on funding falling into place. I think they're hoping to begin construction, sometime next year. But again, that's going to be a long process, and that's going to depend on how successful they are at raising money.
All right. Well, any final thoughts, George?
Just that if they had something like this when I was a kid, I probably would have been bugging my parents on a monthly basis to go to it.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's super. It sounds super cool. I really hope. I think. I'm optimistic they'll get enough. They'll get the support they need and they'll get it off the ground.
Yeah, and I think there's good potential for support outside of the area. But I do think that local civic leaders are probably going to see that this is something that will be worth putting money into.
Plus, as you said, it's just such a golden opportunity.
Yeah.
It would almost be, it'd be such a shame to just not take advantage of it. It's fallen in your lap,
I mean,
practically.
if you look at one of the other things that Megan and her team were looking at is the popularity of comic conventions and similar events just in this region. And again, it's the old story. We're right between Cleveland and Pittsburgh, right between Chicago and New York. So there's a decent population base that will travel to a venue like this to see what it has.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for taking us inside the story, George. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And don't forget to subscribe for more behind the headlines insights to the Byline Breakdown. And just a bit of housekeeping. This will be our last Byline Breakdown of the year. We will be off for the next 2 weeks, so we will be back after the new year. Thank you very much for listening. I'm Mike Moliterno.
You wouldn't drive a car without a map, so why navigate the business world of northeastern Ohio and western Pennsylvania without the Business Journal? Trusted since 1984, we're the compass pointing you to growth and prosperity. Digital, print, why not both? We've got subscription options tailored for every business-savvy individual. Light up your path to success. Subscribe to the Business Journal today.